Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. Dave Loughran welcoming back Greg Ehrenberg, back from, I don't know, would you call it? Was it a vacation? Is it a, I mean, I know you were there for your sister's graduation, but you were there for several. Is it a vacation? Is it an excursion, a trip, a burden?
A little bit of all the above. It's a little bit of everything combined together. I was in Columbus, which is like the epicenter of white people with shitty tattoos, I guess. If anybody's ever been to Columbus before, like everywhere you go, if you go out to a bar or something at night, it's like, hey, there's an average looking white person with like 8 terrible tattoos. That was every single person that lives in Columbus. That was a lot of homeless people. But it was fun. I got to hang out with my family. My sister graduated from college. I was witness to what I assume was the worst graduation and commencement speech in the history of colleges all time. It was so bad that it's become like a pretty big news story. So it was good. It was also helped my sister move a little bit. So those are the parts of it where it's like, is it really a vacation if you're helping somebody move and like fix holes in their wall and stuff like that? But overall, it was well spent time off.
That's good stuff. I will say, you had actually tweeted a couple things about the commencement speech. You sent me something yesterday. And you said that the guy got inspiration through hallucinogens, through psychedelics, in order to pen this masterpiece. What was he shilling Bitcoin?
So what had well, so to start the entire commencement, somebody died. Somebody fell out of the bleachers and died of what is a potential suicide. So then we've got this weirdo commencement speaker that goes on, and a lot of other information has come out afterwards about how he ended up being the commencement speaker. But this guy gets on the mic and he's basically saying like, hey, depression isn't really real. There's no reason to take antidepressants. And there's a couple of keys to being happy in the world, and that is financial security and song and dance. So he starts singing a song, which was very bizarre, bombing with that. And then he just talks about how economic hardships and everything, but how it's possible in the modern times to become financially stable. And the whole thing just ends up being buy Bitcoin and it'll solve all of your world's problems.
Yeah, with what fucking money? I mean, these type of people, man, it's ridiculous. Depression isn't real. He's prepping you, people with liberal arts degrees, for when you don't find a job, and when you do, it's offering you $40,000 a year. That's how he's like, listen, depression's not real. Power through it and buy Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if you live on the street. Yeah, that's insane. But anyway,
I mean, there's so much else involved in this as well. He also the graduation was held at the Ohio State football stadium, which sits over 100,000 people, and it was a packed house. This entire place was filled. When he told people that the solution to all their problems, just like, hey guys, just buy Bitcoin, the entire audience started booing him. A football stadium full of about 100,000 people started booing him, and then people just checked out. They're all talking amongst themselves while he did a magic trick at one point. He started singing another song. He started peddling his personal company, which is just they sell energy bracelets. Then
how is this guy in a position of power? Like how is he overseeing a huge university?
So this guy was the commencement speaker. He's not overseeing anything.
Oh, okay. So he was just okay. I wasn't sure if it was like okay, right. So I forgot. You have like random people and politicians and actors and shit, and them do commencement speeches. So who was he? Who is he?
So he's just this random guy, Chris Pan, who was an Ohio State alum. He was a high-ranking executive at Facebook because he was college friends with Mark Zuckerberg, and now he just sells energy bracelets. But this is where the scandal of it comes into play, is because there's a committee that selects the speaker, and then the president has final say and can overrule the committee. So the committee had a list of 79 names. They'd whittled it down to 10 people they were going to reach out to. It included like LeBron James on the list because he's from Ohio. So stuff like that. And the president goes, no, not using any of these guys. We're going to reach out to this guy, Chris Pan.
We want Mr. Pan. Yeah, get me Mr. Pan.
So it ends up being, though, the president of Ohio State is apparently also very invested in crypto and Bitcoin. He's on the board of a company that mines crypto. So it seems like this whole thing was just set up for this guy, Chris Pan, and the president to try to get more people to invest in front of a massive audience in things that they have financial interests in.
Moron. Anyway, by the way, I love cryptocurrency. I invest in it, but that's insane. Anyway, happy Happy to have you guys with us. If you haven't done so yet, take a second, atone for your sins here on a Wednesday morning. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below if you're watching or listening after the fact. Much appreciated. And if you ever want to listen in podcast form, you know it's out there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. And real quick, Michael Roundtree, Lavi, thanks for the call. And Kyle Harrison yesterday helped me take down a tourney. Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't Harrison was relatively popular, but he ended up having a good start. Michael took down 25K on FanDuel. Dude, he turned 20 bucks into 27,000 on FanDuel yesterday. So shout out to Michael. Massive win on 20 bucks.
Yeah, I saw the tweet where it's like, does this qualify for the Hall of Fame? If that doesn't, that's like the qualifier for the Hall of Fame. That's amongst it. So yeah, I saw some of the winning screenshots come in while I was gone. I didn't really play much DFS the last week. So I'm looking forward to playing some slates and talking to you guys about it.
Let's get into it. So by the way, I don't know if I have any interest in playing this Cardinals Mets game today.
Neither do I. So I am actually, while we're talking, I actually am rerunning the contest generator and the Sims. I took the Mets Cardinals game out. So that game is in a rain delay right now, guys. It has been announced it's not going to start. Well, not in a rain delay right now, but it's not going to start on time. But in addition to that, with the way the weather looks the rest of the day, I think it's very risky to just not play at all.
Those storms look bad. And it looks like there's a line of storms, and then there's another big grouping of storms that's popping up after that. I know it's a day game, but if you look at the forecast, Greg, you're looking at thunderstorms, 50+% chance of storms all the way through 11 o'clock, all the way through midnight. So I don't know. It just, to me, seems like a tough spot. And it sucks because Sonny Gray's been spectacular. I don't think this is a spot that I'm looking to get to.
Yeah.
And if yeah. And like, yeah, maybe they delay it long enough. I just don't see, I don't know about you. I don't see enough of a clearing to where I'm like, okay, that should be fine once we get to 5. Or like, I know you weren't playing DFS probably over the weekend, but there was an Oakland game. It was at Oakland, and then there was another one where it's like it was a day slate and the game didn't start till 4 o'clock or something. So right. So the day slate wasn't over till 7, 8 o'clock. I still don't see that being the case here. So 7 games, some other good pitching options. I'm probably just getting away from this one.
Yep.
Anyway,
I think it's reasonable.
Let's get into it. So we'll start with some pitching. We'll get into stacks. We got plenty of time here. What is it? 12:35 is first pitch, I believe. 12:35.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. But then you've got no other games up until 1. So there's only one 12 o'clock game or 12:30 game. And then I think 110 or something like that. 105 for Phillies, Toronto. Super hot here today. Going to be, partly sunny, super hot, winds blowing out 11 miles per hour at Citizens Bank Park. We know what happens in this park when the weather's blowing. And Chris Bassett and Nola have both coughed up the long ball quite a bit this year, but I'm getting off track. Let's talk about pitching. Dylan Cease, if you were to remove Sonny Gray from all of this, Dylan Cease right now pulling 30% ownership against the Cubs. Now, I'll point out that winds are blowing in at Wrigley Field. Not significantly at all, but there's no wind blowing out there, 67-degree temperatures. You look at the total in this game, it's at 7.5. What are you doing with Cease today at this ownership?
Yeah, so good timing because I just finished running this sim over here. So I'm going to look at what my results ended up being now that I took that game out. And Dylan Cease is picking up, like you said, a ton of ownership. So we've got Cease projected here for 32% ownership. And some of that ownership that's going to Sonny Gray right now, 8%. If that game does get canceled, I think it's going to be dispersed a little bit amongst some of these other high-end pitchers. But Dylan Cease on the road against the Chicago White Sox, I mean, I know there's a lot of strikeout upside in Cease, but I don't like him nearly as much as the field does. So he's not somebody who I'm like, I want to have 0% exposure to. But I have Cease right now in 18% of my lineups. It's a little bit less than what the field, about half of what the field has. And also, if you look at our top pitchers, too, we have him as one of the most negatively leveraged pitchers on the slate, both him and Tanner Bybee also coming in over-owned. Although with that said, I do like Bybee more. We'll talk about him in a second. But it's just a lot of ownership going to Cease. He's really expensive. He's going up against the Cubs offense. It's been really good this year. And they've got Cody Bellinger back now, so they've been a little bit healthier. Let's see what this lineup is because it just came in. And yeah, Horner, Tauchman, Bellinger is playing today. I did have some concern that Bellinger could rest because it was an afternoon game. But just considering how good this lineup has been for the Cubs, I'm not super interested in Cease relative to his ownership.
Hey, by the way, real quick, if someone's new to the I sent you that question, a DM I had yesterday on someone that just got the Sims and was asking questions. How are you going about eliminating games in the contest generator, such as like the Mets in St. Louis? For baseball, it's really the only sport where that really matters to be able to do that quickly.
Yeah, so in the contest generator, I just went in and just removed them. So I sorted by the St. Louis Cardinals and just hit the red button to the left side of the screen to remove them from my player pool. Did the same with the Mets. And then I just reran another pool. So then by the time that I actually sim the slate, like I don't even have those players in lineups.
Right, which makes sense. Biden getting a lot of ownership too. The one thing that stood out to me a little bit was Dylan Cease in the tools looks better. I mean, Bybee is negatively leveraged. He's $8,400, which isn't crazy going up against this Detroit team. He's got good stuff. He's also he's had a couple games where he's just gotten blown up this year. Like it's just been the case with him. But when he's not getting blown up, he's giving you really good games. It's kind of funny the like dichotomy between the good and bad for him is really good and really bad. And you've seen a lot of that this season. He's had great starts against some good offenses too, particularly Atlanta a couple starts back. Would you prefer Bybee over Dylan Cease, despite the fact that they're getting the same ownership?
Yeah, and it's primarily because of the price point, where if Dylan Cease was 8,400 and Bybee was the guy who was over 10K, then I'd prefer Cease. But because Bybee is as cheap as he is, I get to a point where it's like I have to spend my salary somewhere at pitching. And I like the salary savings that I'm getting with Bybee a little bit more here. And then it allows me to spend up more for my hitting. Because if I look at what the pitchers are, I would like to just say, like, I don't want to play any of these chalk pitchers because I do think Bybee's a little bit overowned in the same way I think Cease is. Unfortunately, though, I just kind of have to play somebody at pitcher and spend some of that salary. And Bybee is the one I feel more comfortable with. For cash games, just play both of them. They're both going to be so popular that I think that's the way you go. For tournaments, though, I'm preparing to play a good amount of Bybee and be underweight to Cease.
Okay. Nola's another one, 8,600. I mean, he's a good pitcher. We actually have him positively leveraged. I'm not going to lie, though. And I know he's pitched better at home. The issue that he has is clearly giving up home runs. Like that's that is an issue for Aaron Nola. I know Toronto hasn't been electric this season, but this hitting weather is significant, right? Like you're talking at first pitch, we're looking at winds blowing out 11 miles per hour to right field with 81-degree temperatures, going to get up to 86 in this game and sunny. Like this is one of those games where it's not conducive to pitching at all. And we'll talk about these stacks later on in the show, but is there interest for you? I'll say I have interest in Nola only because he still is positively leveraged. And oftentimes he gives up solo shots where it's like, all right, fine. He went 6, struck out 8, gave up 2 runs, both of them on solo shots. I can live with that, but 9,600 is a little bit costly for me.
Yeah, I think that just because of his ownership, he's a good pivot off of Cease if you have an otherwise popular lineup. If you're playing, let's see, like what's the most popular stack right now? You got the Giants in Coors Field. They're projected for 13%. Oh no, that's the main slate. Sorry. So for the early slate, you've got, for instance, the Dodgers are projected for 11% ownership if you want to go cheap. You've got the Angels projected also for 11% ownership. So if you're rostering one of those super chalky teams, that's where I think it makes sense to go to Nola instead of somebody like Cease or Bybee just to save yourself some ownership, because you could make an otherwise chalky stack different by doing that. So those are the spots where Nola makes sense. But in the grand scheme of things, he's not somebody I have a crazy amount of interest in. I have him in 17% of lineups right now. So it's similar to what I have for Cease. So relative to ownership, I think Nola is a better option. In the grand scheme of things, I don't have much different exposure to the two, but Nola I'm about even with the field with, whereas I'm fairly underweight to Cease just based on the projected ownerships.
If you were to remove Sonny Gray from the equation, it does kind of thin out relatively quick. You're getting into, so like you have Tanner Bybee, you have Dylan Cease, you have Aaron Nola, who, like you mentioned, because of low ownership, perfectly reasonable play. Then you get into this mid-range. but I do think there's a decent amount to talk about here. And some of these guys slightly negatively leveraged, but Michael Lorenzen being one of them against Oakland today. Lorenzen is a perfectly fine pitcher, and he's mid 7K price point. Opposite him, though, and Matt and I talked about this a lot this week. You have a Texas team that struggles versus lefties considerably. They don't strike out a lot, but they have been a really bad offense when it comes to facing left-handed pitching. JP Sears is 6,800. He's had one, maybe I'd say two bad starts on the season. Aside from that, though, JP Sears has actually been pretty good, Greg, and he's sub 7K. And then you have Gavin Stone against the Marlins team that is just dead. Like they've had ownership essentially give up on the team 1 month into the season and start selling off and trading assets. They have a 3.5 run total today. Massive, massive dogs on the road against the Dodgers. So while none of these guys stand out as like, hey, these are amazing plays today, there is some good mid-range, lower mid-range options that we have to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up JP Sears there. He's my favorite contrarian play on the entire slate.
I like him.
And he's somebody who's actually been solid for the Oakland A's. I know you had mentioned how this is a team that they've had no interest in winning kind of for a while now. There was a point in time with Billy Beane where this team was at least trying to optimize their win chances while also saving salary. Now they're just like, fuck it. We're moving to Las Vegas at some point. The fans don't like us anymore. The owner is super hated. And the team is just basically punted on multiple seasons now. But JP Sears is one guy who's actually been fairly decent for them and also provides fantasy upside because he's able to generate strikeouts. He's never picked up really any ownership outside of like a Slate or two. And then also because of his strikeout upside, he has fantasy upside as well. Now, so far this year, he does only have an 18.9% K rate, but last year he did have a 22% K rate. He is decent enough stuff. So I do think he's ultimately going to be a pitcher with a strikeout rate just over 20%. And that is low ownership on a slate of this size, which it's 8 games, but you and I are both anticipating that Mets-Cardinals game getting rained out, which could bring us down to 7 games. If you get a pitcher who's cheap with decent upside for their price and only around 10% ownership, which is what JP Sears is at, I think it's a really good way to differentiate some lineups and allow us to pay up for, say, like a Dodgers stack that is somewhat popular, but this is a way to make that stack different.
Yeah, 100% agree. Could it get ugly? Sure. But how about this? Over his last 3 starts, you'll find this interesting because he's made 7 starts. His first 7, he just wasn't getting really any swinging strikes. His last 3 starts, Greg, against the Yankees in New York, granted he's a lefty, but still in New York, the Baltimore Orioles in Baltimore, and then Miami. And I know he got tuned up by Baltimore, but he struck out 8. He has a 29% K rate over his last 3 starts, with a 13.7% swinging strike rate. So just contrast that to the first half of the small slice of this season already. JP Sears is missing a ton more bats than he was earlier in the season. Of course, like I said, still early. But those last 3 starts against the Yankees, Miami, and Baltimore, 29% K rate, 13.7% swinging strike rate.
And to the point you made before about his strikeout rate being better as of late, it is worth noting that one of the reasons his strikeout rate is as low as it is he got off to a really slow start to the season.
Yep.
His first outing of the year, pitched against the Cleveland Guardians, 3 2/3 innings, 1 strikeout. His second start of the year, pitched on the road against the Detroit Tigers, 5 2/3 innings, 1 strikeout. So strikeout rate has been very good since then. It just really weighed down by the fact that he had 2 shitty starts to open up the year where he didn't generate strikeouts. And he's only made 7 starts this year. So he's got like 5 starts with a solid strikeout rate. And also in tougher matchups, like you had just mentioned, the Orioles, the Yankees, the Cardinals. I know that's not like the most difficult matchup in the world, but still they've got Arenado, they've got Goldschmidt in that lineup. So there are definitely some difficult right-handed hitters that he has to deal with. So he has pitched really well if you take out those first 2 starts of the year.
He has. Yeah. And it's a good park today. I don't hate it. Plus Texas has a 4-run implied total. It's not very high at all. By the way, Clay had asked in the chat here about the Sims. Do you take the stack boosts and do that to get rid of St. Louis, or did you take each player negatively, boost them by 100? No, if you do it in the contest generator, so just go in And like the easiest way, just filter by teams. And like Greg said, X them all out. That red minus symbol next to all of them, just hit that and clear them out, then run the contest generator again. And then you'll be good and you won't have them in any of your lineups. Anyway. What are you doing? Dog's back there digging on the couch. Like JP Sears, I think at not the only thing with Sears is that he's actually getting more ownership than I thought, Greg. He's actually getting more love than I would have anticipated. He's 19% owned right now.
So he must have gone up since I did the last run of the contest generator. Let me refresh. And yeah, 19%. So it is more than it was earlier, but it's still not problematic for me. I have over 20% of Sears.
Yeah, right. So you're just getting over the field here. Lorenzen at 14%, same game against Oakland. Reese Olson, 13% against Cleveland. Just looking at the top pitchers tool here. Sonny Gray, by the way, I don't know when the last time you updated was, I guess right now, but we have Sonny Gray down to 8%. So we're clearly factoring weather into ownership, whereas before we weren't. So now Bybee getting 35%, Cease getting 31, Sears getting 19, Nola getting 18. All of these guys came up as a result of Sonny Gray coming down. What about Gavin Stone today against, oh, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Did you see the Dodgers broadcast before Yamamoto came out yesterday to pitch before his first pitch?
I did. So
unbelievable.
And he ended up having a great start yesterday.
Sure.
But it was, he pitched, what was it, 8 innings, gave up 2 runs. It was funny, though, that they were basically saying that Yamamoto's been so good and the Marlins offense has been so bad that he's on no-hitter watch today. And the announcer pumping up like, hey, guys, don't
the game started, before he pitched through his first pitch.
Yeah. So like leading up to the first pitch of Yamamoto, like, guys, don't turn away from this game. You could be watching a no-hitter today. First pitch of the game, Josh Chisholm home run allowed by Yamamoto.
First pitch of the game. The best part was the color commentator. I'm not sure who it was. There was someone else in the booth that was like, Jazz is going to swing at the first pitch. And he did. Yeah. And he homered. And then Yamamoto ended up having a great game, but it was hilarious. Sean said Sears took a no-hitter into the 7th against Texas last time. Yeah, leave it to our boy Sean. Is that true?
Could be.
Let's see.
I don't doubt it.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, he went 6 1/3, 1 hit, 5 Ks against Texas.
Yeah, Sean is the industry expert on small sample sizes and birthdays.
I love it. He does have a lot stored up there, though. He's got something for everyone. I can tell you that. Oh, Donnie said it was the MLB network before cutting over to the broadcast.
Okay.
All right. Then the awful announcing Twitter account tricked me on that one, but
yeah, I saw the same tweet as you. And I mean, I don't know enough about who the individual like MLB network and Dodgers commentate. I just kind of took the tweet at face value and was like, oh, here's what happened. And then you watch the clip and it does kind of show that's what happened.
Also made it better that way. But, yeah. So what are you doing? Because I want to get into some stacks here. We still got plenty of time. But where do you go with guys like Lorenzen and Stone and Olson? All of these guys in that 7K range. I can't imagine we're getting to a ton of Martin Perez and Joe Ross and Ryan Weathers, but there is a grouping in that 7K range that's worth discussing.
Yeah, for sure. We've got, let's see, how many guys there? Lorenzen and guys picking up ownership too. Lorenzen 15%, Reese Olson 13% now. Gavin Stone 15%. Chris Bassett is 13%. So yeah, there are a handful of guys here of interest.
Gavin Stone, I guess, would be the one that, first of all, he's made what? 6 starts, 31 innings. None of the numbers are super appealing. The guy has a 7% K minus BB rate. It's not great. 4.55 xFIP. Like all of that stuff, a lot of that just screams average, but the strikeout stuff has not been appealing. 17%. Last year with the Dodgers, 31 innings, 14.5% strikeout rate. So you're really banking on something like this where, and it's weird because the swinging strike rate is actually really decent 13.7% between this year and last year, 62 innings. You're really banking on him being able to go deeper into this game if you're not getting the strikeouts. But obviously the ownership is just coming for two reasons. One, Gavin Stone is facing a Marlins team that just got rid of like their best contact hitter, a guy that strikes out at 7%. So you had a little more strikeout upside here. He's been pitching pretty well. And if you get the 5 innings, or on DraftKings, looking, or FanDuel going for quality start as well, but they are such massive favorites that the win equity here is really significant against Weathers. Right now they are, what's the money line? -265 on the money line.
It's a spot with Gavin Stone. I think it makes sense to get some exposure to Gavin Stone as well as stack against him. Stone is terrible, as well as the Marlins offense being terrible. If you look at the numbers last year for Gavin Stone, which I know you laid out a little bit, he only pitched 31 innings at the big leagues, but still a 9 ERA, a 6.4 expected ERA, 6.64 FIP. He also stuck in AAA last year. He pitched over 100 innings in AAA with a 4.74 ERA, a 4.52 FIP. So his strikeout rate has always been solid in the minor leagues. I am interested to see if that is something that could come up for him at the big league level. Because like you had said, Lofty, he's generating swing and misses. It just has never led to strikeouts for him at the big league level, which is very odd, especially when you consider that he was always a guy that was generating strikeouts at the minor leagues, but also gave up runs when he pitched in the minor leagues. He's a little bit older. He's 25 years old. He was never really a highly ranked prospect or anything like that. He's just kind of like organization, quadruple A guy, not quite good enough for the major leagues in all likelihood, but generally is probably a solid pitcher at AAA. So he's kind of somewhere in between. So I think Gavin Stone could have success in this matchup just because the Marlins offense is no good. But if Gavin Stone is just going to be the guy he was last year with a 9 ERA, a 6.4 expected ERA, it's not hard to envision a scenario where the Marlins offense could go off against him at very low ownership. And in addition to that, because the Marlins are on the cheaper end, you could also roster Dylan Cease and Aaron Nola in the same lineup with a Marlins stack, and it's going to be a very different looking lineup. So I like both sides of that game.
So do I. Yeah, I said the same thing about like Harrison in Colorado yesterday. Harrison ended up having a very nice game. Pitchers at cores, it just doesn't matter anymore, especially if they're decent. Sean V. Bryce Harper had homered in his last 3 games where the Phillies are favored. Sean, now you're just fucking with me. Now you're just, come on, dude. Come on. Phillies have been favored a lot lately. They've had 3 games against north of 500 opponents. Although I do like Philly a lot today. We'll get into that. I think if I'm looking at, now that we have updated ownership, like what pitchers stand out the most, Bybee, Cease looks good, but you're right. That discount on Bybee is really significant. It's similar ownership. Sears, just that price point I like. And we didn't talk a ton about him because you just dug in on Gavin Stone. Michael Lorenzen against Oakland is definitely a spot that I think is pretty decent. I mean, they're road favorites. Oakland has a 3.7 implied total. It's still a favorable park for right-handed pitchers. And it's not like Lorenzen is great. He doesn't have the greatest strikeout stuff, but he's decent at preventing runs. Oakland has the 4th highest strikeout rate in the league versus right-handed pitching this season. They have a 95 WRC plus, which is bottom 10 in baseball. Yes, they have some power, right? Like middle of the road ISO. But overall, I think this spot for Lorenzen looks perfectly reasonable. I don't think he's underpriced. I don't think he's overpriced. I just think it's a decent enough spot for a guy that has a 18% strikeout rate and has been okay.
Yeah, and it's mostly because of, like, I have 14% of Lorenzen, so I don't have any kind of real stand here. He's in a matchup where he has a lot of strikeout upside. The Oakland Desert team has actually been probably better than a lot of you guys realize. They're kind of in contention for wild cards, but I don't expect that to be the case going forward. I think it's probably been more fluky than anything, but they have been more competitive than expected. But anytime a pitcher is going up against like the Oakland A's, the Miami Marlins, it does warrant at least some level of interest. And Michael Lorenzen, who Eric Lindquist once called the best hitting pitcher in baseball, not all that long ago, he forgot that Shohei Ohtani exists. I think he's also a pretty decent pitcher, not great or anything, but throws hard, has the ability to generate some strikeouts. And because of the matchup against Oakland, he lands in 14% of my lineups. Not all that different from the field, but he's somebody to get into lineups for sure.
Who do you think the best hitting pitcher was? Not including Ohtani. It's like, because obviously that's the answer, but over the last decade, Madison Bumgarner?
I mean, decade's so hard because, I mean, the answer is probably Michael. The answer is Michael Lorenzen.
You think so?
Yes. If I look at Michael Lorenzen was good enough that he played the outfield as well.
Yeah, it probably was. Dude, didn't Bumgarner have a bunch of home runs?
Yeah, but he still had like a 50 WRC plus or something like that.
Yeah. You know how many home runs he had? Take a guess.
16?
19.
Okay.
Pretty good.
So for reference, Michael Lorenzen has an 84 career WRC plus. That certainly is probably a good amount higher than Bumgarner's.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, Bumgarner, other than Ohtani, but Bumgarner holds the record for most home runs by a pitcher outside of guys that I've never heard of before. Like, obviously I've heard of Bob Gibson and some of these guys, like Don Drysdale, but we're talking black and whites when you click on their name. So yeah, I guess it probably is Lorenzen. Obviously Ohtani, the easy answer there, but any other pitchers you want to get to? Like any interest in Soriano, Reese Olson? I'm not getting to Chris Bassett today. I really don't like that spot for Chris Bassett, particularly with how this Phillies team has been hitting, even without Trey Turner in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I have some exposure to Chris Bassett, but not anybody who's like a real priority for me. If I'm punting with one of these pitchers today, my preferred guy to go to is JP Sears. On the high end, my preferred option is Tanner Bybee.
Okay. Let's talk about some stacks. By the way, you guys, you hear us talk about the Sims often, but you ever want to jump in week or a month, you know where to find it. Links in the description and in the chat. Shout out to all the wins that we've seen recently too. We just had a huge dump on the Hall of Fame channel today from a bunch of people winning with the tools and getting the tools, a free month. You rock the stochastic avatar, you're getting the free month. You finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more. Doesn't matter if you win 50,000 or $50, as long as it's in a field of 5,000 or more. It doesn't matter what the entry is. So check it out. I mean, take a look. Go to the Odd Shopper Hall of Fame Twitter account right now and look at some of the submissions that we've got just this morning and just last night. It's been a hell of a run recently. NBA Showdown, NBA 2-game, MLB main slates, MLB small slates. So the tools are working, be it the lineup generator or the Sims tool, which you get that. You're getting every tool on the site. You get the premium Discord with both of those, no matter which direction you want to take. So if you're ever interested, we'd love to have you come join us and maximize your profits, make better lineups, build better lineups, and make the process just exponentially easier than it's ever been in the past. All right. So I actually want to start with Philly for a second here. We'll get to the Dodgers against the left-handed Ryan Weathers. They have the highest top stack probability, but Philly here, second highest on the slate. They have a 5-run implied total. If you weren't here at the top of the show, I'll mention it again, but winds blowing out to right field at 11 miles per hour, 81 degrees at first pitch. It's only going to get warmer. The Phillies bats have been on fire. Now, look, you can cool off at any moment. You can't quantify when a hot streak's going to begin or end, but this is a good hitting team. Chris Bassett, though, I was really shocked, Greg, when I looked at, because Chris Bassett's never been a bad pitcher, but this season, he has a 6% swinging strike rate. 6%. He's not getting strikeouts at a good clip. Like last year, 22.5. He's down at 20%, walking batters at an 11% clip, 1.5 home runs per 9. There's some issues here that he could run into in a spot like this. So, and 16% home run to fly ball rate. Philly looks very interesting. It's just a matter of how expensive they are, and they are very expensive today.
Yeah, so I have a good amount of Philly hitters as one-offs. I've got 3-man stacks. as a 5-man stack of Philly, I'm only getting to 4%. It's not because I don't like the spot. It's not because I don't like the hitters. It's really just because of how expensive they are. It makes it really prohibitive. I've had the same issue with the Dodgers for a lot of this season, although I am getting myself to some of the Dodgers today. But if I'm spending up for one offense today, my lean is the Dodgers over the Phillies. So I do have 13% 5-man Dodger stacks, just 4% 5-man Philly stacks. If the entire team goes off and they put up a million runs, which is certainly a possibility for today, it's probably not going to be the best slate for me this afternoon. But my preferred spend up team is going to be the Dodgers.
Yeah, I get it. I wanted to update real quick ownership on stacks. Are the Dodgers still coming in significantly higher owned than the Phillies?
A little bit, not really significantly though. I'll refresh it, but it was 9% ownership to the Phillies and 12% to the Dodgers.
It's now 9-13, but yeah, Angels in the middle of that at 11% against Martin Perez. That's a little bit surprising. I assume most of that is just because they're cheap. You know, I think it's just because you have a bunch of cheap bats for the Angels. Because it's not like Martin Perez, I don't know, call me crazy. Like Martin Perez is the type of guy that you stack against him, it oftentimes does not end particularly well for you. Like he's allowed 2 home runs in 40 innings this season. He's been good, Greg. He's not a good fantasy pitcher because he doesn't rack up elite strikeouts, but like Martin Perez year in and year out is a perfect back end rotation lefty that I think any team would be fine with running out there in the regular season. It's just who he is.
Yeah, I've exposure to the Angels less than the field though. Like you just mentioned, they're the second most popular team on the slate. I've single digit exposure to them as a stack. There's also no individual hitter that I'm getting to a lot of, but there's sensible places you could go to on this team to save salary with. I've got Kevin Pillar in around 10% of lineups. Taylor Ward, although he's a little bit more expensive. Logan O'Hoppe, Cole Tucker as well. So there are some cheap hitters that land in, like 8 to 10% of my lineups from the Angels, but I'm not as interested in the field at that ownership where we have them at, 11.2% ownership as a team. I've got some of them, just not quite that much. I think they make more sense as one-offs.
Yeah. Look, when you have Kevin Pillar coming off that 2 home run game, by the way, when you have him at 2,600 batting cleanup, like people are going to want to play this team because they're so cheap. With Trout out, Taylor Ward and O'Hoppe are up there. But look at like Drury, and I'm not saying any of these guys are exciting, but the majority of them have I didn't even look. Do they all have the platoon advantage? Is this how many righties?
It's a lot of righties.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 7 righties.
Yeah, it's a lot. And the wind's blowing out as well.
Still not a great park, but the wind blowing out. You have Drury against the lefty at 3,400. You have Pillar at 2,600 batting cleanup. Adrian's is 2,500 leading off, and Tucker, granted lefty, but he's 2,400 batting second.
By the way, Tucker's a switch hitter. They actually only have one lefty in the lineup today.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they only have one lefty in the entire lineup. They just threw a bunch of righties at Martin Perez.
Right. Well, Calhoun, right, is the only lefty that there is.
Calhoun batting 7th. He's the only one.
So you've got the 1, 2, and 4 hitters at 2,600 or cheaper today. That's actually very uncommon to see something like that.
Yeah, there is. I mentioned before, Taylor Ward is $5,200. That's really it, though. You got Logan O'Hoppe, who I think is a decent option for a catcher at $4,200. He's not that expensive. And the rest of the team is just insanely, insanely cheap. It's a very good 3-man stack as well to save salary. Like if you have a Dodgers 5-man stack and you're looking for a correlated secondary stack to save salary with, you could do worse than building a 3-man Angels stack where you might have like Adrianza, Kevin Pillar, and something like, Cole Tucker, all guys hitting at the top of the order, like $2,400, $2,500, $2,600. They're great for salary savings. I just don't have as much 5-man stacks them as the field.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, one more thing, just to backtrack the pitching. Well, we can kind of tie this in. Thomas Rensberger said Phillies have been striking out at a high clip, even with hitting well lately, even with them hitting well lately. Absolutely. Look, they're going to, even when the Phillies are hot, they're going to strike out a lot because like Marsh has a 30+% K rate. Schwarber has a 30+% K rate. Real Muto and Castellanos are both striking out north of 25%. There are strikeouts in this lineup. So if that is your argument towards like, hey, maybe I will play a low owned 12% or, relatively low owned Chris Bassett, it's not crazy. Like Bassett could go out there and rack up 9 strikeouts. This Philly team, Greg, for as well as they've hit, for as much power as they have, and granted, as good as the hitting conditions are today, there are a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. There's no getting away from that.
Yeah. And I mean, Chris Bassett's one of the cheap guys that's in the mix for me. Like I said, my preferred guy is JP Sears to be getting to. Maybe I should do an ROI boost to Chris Bassett just because I'm going to be underweight to the Phillies. Maybe it makes sense to just force myself to more Bassett because it's not like the Phillies are going to go out and be able to like stink or anything like that if Bassett doesn't pitch reasonably well. So maybe I should give myself a little bit more Bassett just for leverage purposes.
Yeah. And there is some upside in this match. There's also a lot of downside, but a lot of upside as well. If you're getting more Dodgers than Philly, and you're getting what around the field on the Angels right now, it sounds like.
Yeah, I am underweight to the I'm underweight to the Angels overall. My favorite spot to be utilizing them though is secondary stacks and one-offs.
What are some other spots we should, and the one-offs there are super nice too if you're looking for some cheap hitters, particularly at the top and middle of that order. What are some other stacks that stand out? Because again, you have some pitchers that aren't great, but aren't terrible. And then some good pitchers and not great matchups where like, all right, if you just say you're not stacking or playing the St. Louis Mets game, that takes one out of the mix. Dylan Cease is good. Even if you don't have a ton of him, you're probably not looking to stack a lot of Chicago. You mentioned Miami's fine against Gavin Stone, both sides of that. Detroit against Bybee. Cleveland against Reese Olson's not a great spot. Oakland against Lorenzen isn't great. Do you consider any Toronto against Aaron Nola?
That is not really. I've got a couple of them, but nothing all that significant. A team that is kind of just like middling owned in the middle of the slate here that we don't have like wowing top stack odds or anything like that, but I do like a decent amount for this slate. The Kansas City Royals against Joe Ross. Joe Ross isn't really much of a strikeout threat. He's also a pitcher who used to be a highly touted prospect, but just hasn't really panned out, primarily due to injuries. The guy's been hurt a ton over the course of his career. His numbers this year aren't great, not terrible either, though. 4.65 ERA, 4.65 ERA, 3.93 expected ERA. He isn't generating strikeouts. He's also typically been a pitcher that has a well above league average home run to fly ball rate. This is a Royals team that it has decent power in the offense. It also has decent speed. So it's not overall like a top 5 offense in baseball or anything like that. But when they do have big games, it comes from home runs. It comes from stolen bases. So it's been one of the better potential fantasy offenses in baseball the last couple of years, even if that hasn't meant that they're particularly great for real life purposes. And I kind of do like the matchup against Joe Ross. So this team picking up 8% ownership. They also have decent top value odds in the top stacks tool because they are relatively cheap across the board. You get some individual hitters like Bobby Witt Jr. that are fairly expensive. But outside of that, this is a team that isn't all that difficult to get to. And I do like the upside in Kansas City.
So do I. And they show up pretty decent in the top, like, top 5, top stack probability. Not bad. No real leverage on either side. They're like top 5 in the stack score on the top stacks tool. I think all of that looks pretty decent. Any interest on the other side of this one? Milwaukee against Brady Singer, who's been very, very good to start the season.
For me, it's a no. I have, out of my top 150 lineups, one of them is a Milwaukee Brewers stack, and it's kind of twofold. I don't like either side of this. Brady Singer is a pitcher I've hardly ever rostered for DFS purposes this year. He's also been very expensive on a lot of slates, which has made it difficult to go ahead and get to him. But in the same time, too, the Brewers offense is good enough I don't want to play Brady Singer. I don't want to stack against him because he's been solid. He has a 2.45 ERA, a 3.9 expected ERA. The also other issue there is with stacking against Brady Singer, his ground ball rate is so high this year, 56.3% ground ball rate. That really makes me question how likely are you to be getting home runs off of this guy. So Brady Singer, price point matchup makes it too much for me to really want to play him. But on the other side, he's been good enough to where I'm not interested in stacking the Brewers.
Truth is, you're not going to get a lot of home runs off Brady Singer. We've seen that.
Yeah.
You know, even last year when he wasn't as good as this, he still wasn't giving up a lot. I mean, really, he's never allowed a lot of power. You know, he's clearly well above average in terms of coughing up home runs. What about San Diego against Wisniewski?
Yeah, so San Diego against Wisniewski, another pretty middling stack, which is also shown in our top stacks tool here. I mean, 6% ownership, 5.5% chance to be a top stack. I have them in 5% of my lineup, so not all that different from the field. It's just kind of a team that exists for me. The team that I am finding myself getting overweight to, that I touched on a little bit at the top, the Miami Marlins, I'm very skeptical that Gavin Stone is going to be anywhat decent going forward. Sucked at the big leagues last year, sucked in AAA last year. It's not that I have that much confidence in the Marlins being good, but nobody's playing them. They are 3.9% owned as a team. They're relatively cheap. So that's a spot that I'm liking to get overweight to and differentiate some lineups.
Trying to see if there's anything else that actually stands out. And I don't really think there is. I mean, unless you're trying to get to Texas against Sears, I don't love that spot. Toronto against Nola, but still, I mean, Nola's still good. You know, despite some of the issues he has, he's still very good. The bullpen is hit or miss, but they're figuring things out in Philly. I don't really have any other spots here that are good. I guess there's one more that we haven't talked about. We've covered a lot over the last like 45 minutes, 50 minutes really, is Pittsburgh against Jose Soriano. They are in our top stacks tool, top 3 in top stack probability. Now, yes, PNC Park, very favorable for pitching, but winds blowing out to left center at 12 miles per hour, going to get up to 80 degrees in this game. And Pittsburgh actually looks pretty decent all in all. And our tools bear that out as well. 4.9 run implied total as well.
I think the thing I have the biggest issue with is how much is the win going to come into play when Soriano is a 58% ground ball rate this year, and for his career, it's 54%. Yep. So it's likely going to be a lot of balls hit on the ground against Soriano. If there are a few that get lifted, sure, those are live to be home runs. Also, the Pittsburgh Pirates offense has been the case for this team. I don't know how many years in a row now where they get off to a hot start. People are like, oh my God, are the Pittsburgh Pirates the sleeper team this year? And then once you get into, May, they're 500. By the time you get into the summer, they're 15 games below 500. Same deal every single year for the Pirates. I've got some exposure to them, but at 9% ownership, it's not really any kind of priority for me. I'm a little bit underweight to the field. The 3 teams that I'm getting to the most, and we've talked on all of them at this point, but it's the Marlins and the Royals. Marlins at really low ownership, the Royals like middling ownership, and then the Dodgers are the chalky stack that I like the most on that slate.
All right, let's do our top 3 pitchers, top 3 hitters, and then we'll get into some home runs as well. I got one. We can pull it up on Odd Shopper too, see what we're looking at there. Usually you can always find a ton of plus EV home run props there, but even if there's one you really like, you can do yourself a service and find the spot where the odds are the best, because they differ so greatly, just immensely, with home run props. Like, all right, so, well, I'll get there in a second. By the way, free squares on Sleeper again today if you're new. $500 first match deposit bonus. Sick dynamic pricing, up to 100x your entries. And if you're in non-legal betting states, you hear us talking about betting home runs and stuff. Can't do that on the other pick'em sites. You can on Sleeper because they have multipliers on these home runs. So, like, if you're looking to get home run plays on any of these nice warm weather games today where the ball could be flying, you can add them into your lineups over on Sleeper with whatever multiplier it may be. Give yourself a chance at a big return. Now, I'm not saying go crazy, but there's a lot you can do over there where, you might be in a state you can't parlay, or as Eric's been doing, round robining home runs. Great place to do it. And I think multiple free squares, one for basketball, one for baseball today over at Sleeper. If you're a new user, take advantage of that, maximize your ROI, and get going. But yeah, up to $500 deposit bonus is massive. You won't find that anywhere else. All right, top 3 pitchers. Who do we got, Greg?
All right. So for me, top 3 pitchers, I am going to go with Tanner Bybee. That's an easy one for me. JP Sears. I'll still put Dylan Cease into this. I'm underweight to him, but still, I have him in 18% of lineup. So Sears, Cease, Bybee.
Okay. Sears, Cease, Bybee. I have to go with those guys as well. I'll throw Lorenzen into the mix just because I think he's kind of just sitting there. And then Bassett to me feels like one of those guys that's either he gets annihilated, super hot day, winds blowing out, or he misses a ton of bats because the Phillies strike out at an alarmingly high clip. So I think just as a tournament option, there's some interest there. Top stacks, give me, I'm not going to go crazy here. Dodgers, Philly, and, you know, I'm almost tempted to throw the Angels in there just because of how cheap they are, but I'm with you. And I think it makes more sense as just like one-off pieces, given how highly owned they are. So as the number 3 stack, let's go. We'll go Kansas City.
Dodgers, KC, and Miami for me.
Homer picks. Give me Kyle Schwarber. I'll go to the good weather. I'll go to the strikeout or home run against the guy that's given up 1.5 home runs per 9. On FanDuel, we have this as a plus EV play, as a matter of fact. FanDuel has the odds at plus 240. True odds here, plus 223. Slates like Pinnacle, 186. Caesars, plus 175. This is why you never just grab home runs on one book. A $100 bet, if it wins, nets you 240 on FanDuel, only 175 on Caesars. That's crazy. Kyle Schwarber, lock him up. What about you?
I'm going to go with Jake Berger. Jake Berger, who is projected for 4% ownership. We're still waiting on the Marlins lineup, so hopefully he's in. It's also going to be really annoying if the Marlins put out a weird lineup because they don't have to late swap everything. But Jake Berger at a cheap price point and no ownership.
All right. Joe Kastic said Homer pick in more ways than one. No, it's just a good spot. Sports Wiz said Harper. Kenny with Hunter Renfroe. All right. Let's get it, boys. Anything else before we get out of here and let people finalize these lineups before lock in 10 minutes?
No, guys, that's going to be it. Normal deal for today. Going to have MLB live before lock. Only a 1-game NBA slate. So NBA live before lock, just going to be 30 minutes because I don't really think that it needs to be an hour talking about one game. And then there'll be the playback show afterwards, myself and Josh watching the game, sweating and breaking it down. So that's what we got for the rest of the day.
Hell yeah, man. Follow Greg, G. Ehrenberg, DFS, me at Lafayette_D. Shout out to Jordan for producing this one. And we will see you guys back here tomorrow. I would assume it's another live before lock. I think we have like one night game tomorrow. So 1 or 2 night games.
Probably.
So Thursday, we'll see you back here, another early live before lock, and good luck. Peace.